Hello everyone. I wanted you to join in with me today. I wanted to talk to you about something. You've seen a tour of my home this past summer, and I haven't done a fall tour, but I wanted to talk to you just a little bit about the history of my home. So come on, have a seat with me at the table today, and get yourself a cup of coffee over there. And let's just sit down and let's just have a nice chat. My history of this log cabin is very interesting. I have three daughters, but two of my daughters are very excited about genealogy and their ability to research and get a lot of genealogy done. They have a lot of friends and family members who also do a lot of research. So they have brought me a lot of information that they have actually spent a lot of time researching on these things. I will be putting some photographs in at the end of the video, some photographs of people and maps of the lay of the land as it used to be. And where I'm going to start out talking to you about, I'm going to tell you some of our stories about our house. If you're not interested in it, I understand that. I was never one to be interested in things of the supernatural that I could not explain. But since I have lived in this log cabin since 1985, moved in September of 85, there have been some things that have happened that I cannot explain at all. I cannot explain it, but they have happened. So since that has occurred, I have done some research, and people have also come up to me and wanted to give me information about the cabin that I currently live in. And if you did take the tour with me that I did, I think it was in June, of the log cabin, I really do appreciate you doing that. I really appreciate that. And all your comments meant so much to me when you put your comments down and when you did like the video. So let's get started on just a little bit of history. Now, am I a big history buff? I probably am medium on the scale. History is not really my cup of tea, but I do enjoy it, especially if I can relate to it or it affects me, or I can learn from it. That's when I like history. Now, I do have a handout that was given to me by someone. It's called Weekly County, Tennessee Genealogy Web. And of course, I'm in Weekly County, Tennessee. If you haven't watched me before, that's where I'm located. And what I'm going to talk about today is the history of my log cabin. And I'm also going to talk about Gardner, Gardner history. I have a handout that was written by Louise Hester Arnold. And I don't know, Miss Louise, if you are still alive, but if you are, I certainly do appreciate you recording all this vital information for all of us who've come after you. It's so important to record your history. I encourage you to do that. Write things down, make a video, explain things that you can remember so that they can be passed on to all the upcoming generations. They need to know this history of where they're living, how things were, and how the family was. What I'm going to talk to you mainly about today is the connection of this log cabin with the Bell Witch. Now, I don't know a whole lot about the Bell Witch. I do remember when I was working in 1987 at the hospital here in the town where I live, I was approached by someone who worked with me and told me that they had always felt like this cabin had a large connection to the Bell Witch, and she always wanted to talk to me about that, but I would not encourage her, and I did not encourage her. I said, okay, well, we'll talk sometime. I didn't want to know anything about it then. I didn't want to hear anything she had to say. I wanted to run from that like it was the plague. I didn't want any part of it. Now I'm really interested in the history, and I'm interested in learning. So I regret that, and that dear sweet lady that wanted to talk to me is now passed away. So that opportunity, I just let it go to the wayside. So don't do that. Don't do what I did. What I want to talk to you today is about a little history of Gardner community, which I'm about a mile from there right now, where this log cabin is. I will be reading some of this, and I do apologize for that. But at my age, my memory is not like it used to be, and I can't scan something and then remember it. And Miss Louise, the one that wrote this, I give all the credit to you. I'm going to talk to you about Gardner Station in Weakley County, Tennessee. Gardner was named for Colonel John Almus Gardner, Senior. There was a junior. He was the senior. He gave the land. He got a huge land grant, and he gave all the land, I don't know how many acres it was, to make a Gardner Station in 1852. And he organized the Nashville and the Northeastern Railroad. And he became the first president of that railroad. So he had to have had a lot of income from somewhere to get all that established and to get the railroad set up into that town, and also to get a post office started. Now, the original settlement was 1 1/10 mile north of where Gardner is today in 2005. The railroad came through, and of course with the railroad coming through, you know, it really became influential and had more people coming in. It had a school, they had teachers, they had a community center, all the things that a town would have had. Now I'm going to go into Joshua Gardner, who was a brother of John Almus Gardner Jr. They were brothers. Joshua Gardner lived in Robertson County, which is Adams, Tennessee, is where he resided. He lived there. He came from Virginia. They came from Virginia, and he settled in Adams. And I've got the dates here. I think it was around 1817 when he settled there. And he met a lady that he wanted to court, and was going to get engaged to her. And they did get engaged. And her name was Elizabeth Bell. And her nickname was Betsy. They gave her a nickname from Elizabeth, and they called her Betsy. So her name was Betsy Bell. Now, Joshua was in Robertson County, Alamo, Tennessee, when he became engaged to her. Now, during the engagement period, Betsy Bell was the youngest daughter of John Bell Sr. And these dates were from about 1812 to 1821. She began when she was around 11 or 12 years old. She would complain of various things that would happen during the night. She would hear things or see things, and so you know, the parents, of course, how you would be if your children were doing that, you wouldn't really believe them. But finally one night, Mr. Bell did see something. He did not know what it was, but in this documentation that you can pull up on the internet for yourself and read about every detail, he began to witness things that he would see, and he reported that he saw strange dog-like animals in the cornfield. And he would take his gun and he would put shots out there and try to either kill it or scare it off or whatever. And so one time later, one of Mr. Bell's sons saw what he thought looked like a very large bird that was coming up to the house and haunting Betsy. it kept on a lot of times. It sounded at times like a dog chewing on the floor, or how a mouse will sound if it's scratching on the walls. There were sounds like that, and they seemed to escalate. When Betsy would try to go to bed at night in Alamo, in her home, they would have more noises, more things that would go on. Occasionally there was sounded like heavy stones were falling and hitting the floor, or like chains dragging, or somebody pulling the chairs over the floor. The bells that went so far to get help from their neighbors, and soon the news of the haunting spread throughout the community. Over time, the person or thing that was haunting them developed a voice and would actually speak. And so the family that had been witnessing all this finally gave that haunting a name, and they named the haunting Kate. That way, when they were talking about it, they would have a title to talk about it with their neighbors or their friends or their families, so that they would know what they were talking about. So they described it as Kate. Now, like I said, you can pull all this up off the internet. There's a ton of YouTube videos on the Bell Witch. Seemingly, they thought that whatever was haunting Betsy was probably a witch, because it was getting more and more like a human being. Like it would speak, and it knew things, and almost like it knew their thoughts. Like I said, at the time it started, Betsy was 12. But then Betsy met Joshua Gardner, who lived in Robertson County not in Alamo, but in Adams, Tennessee, where she lived. And so around the age of 15, they had met, and also they had, went to social events together, and he asked Betsy Bell to marry him. Well, she said she would, so she got an engagement ring. And so they were engaged and got engaged in 1821. Everyone wished them all kinds of luck and everything, but Betsy was still getting the hauntings. Her getting engaged did not stop it. And it wasn't long after that, when she got engaged, that the hauntings were much more intense and much more often. Kate, as they called the haunting, would speak and say, Betsy, please don't marry. Please don't get married to Joshua Gardner. Please don't, please don't. Over and over, she would be so intense and earnestly saying that to her in that mysterious voice that they could not identify. So Betsy's father had died previous few years earlier from pneumonia, and he had been on the bed very sick, and the hauntings were still going on, and he was very worried about the hauntings, and he became ill with pneumonia, and he passed away. Betsy thought that probably Kate had poisoned her father and had killed him with some kind of poison, but that other people thought he had pneumonia and he passed away from that. Betsy was afraid that the haunting person and all of the noise and racket and voices telling her not to marry Joshua, she was afraid that if she did, either ill fate would come to him or to her. So she broke off the engagement to him. When he learned that she was not going to marry him, he was very distraught, as any young man would have been. And so he decided that he would go to Weakley County, where the rest of his family was currently living. So he left Alamo, Tennessee, and he came to Weakley County. Now, I think initially he stopped in Henry County, which is where Paris, Tennessee is, and then he came on to Weakley County. And over time, he eventually married here. I think they said that the hauntings ended about 1824, and Betsy was age 18, and she married, Betsy ended up marrying there in Alamo to one of her former teachers who was smitten with her because she was so bright, so beautiful, so intelligent, had blonde hair and beautiful blue eyes. And he was 11 years older than her, and his name was Richard Powell. And he loved her. He just thought the world of her. So they ended up getting married. So the hauntings did stop. Now, Joshua did, in his biography, if you read Joshua Gardner's biography, you will see that he did feel at certain times that the Bell Witch had left Alamo when he left after Betsy broke off their engagement. Several people have said they thought that the Bell Witch had been here, and Joshua is buried. I cannot think of the district where that cemetery is located, but I do know of someone who has been told not to go to that cemetery for any reason because they felt like that the Bell Witch was there where Joshua had been buried. I don't know the location of that. I'm sure you can Google that and find his location. I do thank everybody who does put information up and who does research on these things, this history, important pieces of history that was probably not recorded very well during that time period. People were so busy just trying to make a living and put crops in the ground and survive. They did not have time to do a lot of autobiographies or biography information. Census records were scant. Also probably recordings, land exchanges, those types of things probably were scant. I do appreciate you listening to me about this, about the Bell Witch having a connection with the Gardners. Now, this cabin at one time was owned by Josie Lee Gardner, who was the daughter of John Almus Gardner Jr., not the senior, the junior, and she lived here. Now, she left, and I think the year, I'm not sure of the year that she left, but she left after she had married, and we have a deed where she owned this property, the land and the cabin. We do not know if Gardner built the cabin or if it was already here when he came. We do not know. Because in Dresden, Tennessee, in Weakley County, they did not start keeping any records until 1848. So we do not know how long this cabin has been here, but it was here in 1848 when they started keeping records. Josie Lee left and went to Denning, Texas, because everybody who was wealthy or had money or land to sell left and went to Texas for the oil. It was a very a wonderful time for people who had money to go and drill for oil and make more money. So that's what Josie Lee did, and left the cabin. From that time, we have a big gap in who owned the land and the cabin until the early 20s. Around the early 20s is when we see some records of my husband's family purchasing the land and the cabin that was on the land. My whole reason for going over the Bell Witch with you today is because I think it's a huge piece of history. If you have been to New England, you know that New Englanders really believe in those witches and witch hunts and things like that. So it's an interesting bit of history that I hope you will enjoy learning about. Now, I do want to tell you, we moved in the house in 85, like I have said, and when we moved in, I was not worried about it being haunted or fearful. I was not afraid. I'm a Christian, and I don't like I told you, I don't believe in a lot of that supernatural, scary stuff. However, there have been some things that have happened in this home that I cannot explain in any way. I have never seen anyone, never felt any unusual thing happen, but I have heard things, and I have seen things happen. One of the scariest things that I have told y'all in another video, we were sitting at this, not this exact table, but we were sitting in this exact location in my kitchen where I am today. I was sitting over there, my daughter was sitting here. She'd come in from a date, and we were having a piece of pie. We always did, just have a little snack and talk after a date to see how it went and everything, just see where they went and what they did and all the details, and Mama wants to know. And so we were sitting here just talking, and all of a sudden, we're sitting here, and my husband was at work because he worked as a police officer, and he was on the afternoon shift. So down the stairway, from up above the loft here in my kitchen, down the stairwell, someone came down in heavy, heavy boots. It sounded almost like you would have thought they had on some kind of equestrian outfit or some military gear. It was extremely loud, and my daughter and I jumped up and ran out. My mother-in-law and father-in-law were still alive at that time and lived across in the other field across, and we ran that way to them. They came back, nobody was here. Nothing was here. We've never forgotten that night. We've never been able to explain it away. We cannot imagine what that was. Somebody came down those stairs, just like they were just walking down the stairs. Another time, Alan and I were asleep in the bedroom. That was the original kitchen back in the 20s, back in the back, a part that they had added onto this house, not part of the cabin. And we were in bed early one morning, and I got up because I needed to go to the bathroom, and I got up and I went to the bathroom, went back to bed, and I got in bed. And when I got in bed, I just couldn't believe the smell of sausage. It was so strong. And I laid down on the pillow, and I thought, wow, what is that? I thought Alan was still asleep. He's laying there beside me, and he bumped me on the leg, and he says, are you not going to get up and go check on that sausage that you're cooking? I said, honey, I'm not cooking sausage. I just got up to go to the bathroom. I'm not cooking any sausage. He said, what? I said, I'm not cooking sausage. And we both were flat in bed, and we raised straight up. The smell, I could not begin to tell you how strong the sausage was. Now, when we took possession of the home and it was in terrible disrepair, there was a black cast iron stove. I sleep on this side in the room. The black cast iron stove was here, which we took out, but it was here in the very corner where I lay down and sleep and where our bed is positioned. That's where the huge cast iron stove that they would put wood in and cook. And it smelled just like they were cooking sausage. It was something we could not explain, either one of us. He got up and went out and looked across to see if his mother and dad's lights were on, to see if they might have been cooking breakfast. But no, their lights weren't on. He thought the smell was coming across and they were cooking, and it was, coming across, but it was too strong to be coming in from anywhere. And we have never been able to explain that to each other. And we know what we smelled. It was amazing. Another story, when we moved in September of '85, my aunt, my mother's sister, she was 7 years older than me, and she said, well, when you move in, I'll come and I'll stay a few days with you and bring my kids, and our kids can have a big time, and you and I can have a big time, setting up everything and getting all your dishes in and getting everything put away and getting pictures on the wall. And she loved to decorate and fix up a house, and so she came to help me. So we took a break one afternoon. We got tired and pooped out. We went in the living room to sit down on the couch a minute. We were sitting in there, and we had the windows open. It was kind of a really nice, cool afternoon, and we had the windows open. I will never forget this. And we were sitting in there, and all of a sudden everybody was going, do y'all smell something? What is that smell? And finally I said, oh my gosh, I do smell something. And I said, it almost smells like gasoline. And my aunt said, well, yeah, it really does. Do you think something's on fire? Well, of course, Alan was working at the police station. He wasn't here. So her two children and my three kids got up and went in every direction to look to see if anything was on fire. Carolyn and I got up and we took off outside looking. When Carolyn and I got up and went out, we did not find anything. No smoke anywhere, nothing around, nothing on fire. But when we came out of the living room and came through into the cabin of the kitchen, we did not even smell the gasoline smell. So when we went back through the dog trot back into the other cabin, we did smell it immediately. We immediately smelt that smell again. And Carolyn looked at me and she said, you know what they're doing? And I said, who? She said, well, the people that used to live here are lighting the kerosene lamps at night. And I said, oh, wow, thanks, Carolyn. That really makes me feel good. But it did smell just like somebody, if you've ever had an oil lamp in your home where you put the oil in there and you light those lamps, they do put off a scent. And in the day, they used kerosene in those lamps, and it did burn, and it did smell just like what I was smelling and what we were all smelling that day. And so I have never forgotten that. Carolyn, she's been gone for a while. I can't remember. I think she died in 2018. And so she's been gone since then, but we were 7 years apart. She was my aunt, but we were more like sisters, and I miss her every day, and I won't ever forget that story about what we smelled and what we thought it was. That's all it could have been. We couldn't explain it, and we would talk about that several times when we would get together. She lived 3 hours from me, so we got to see each other pretty often, but of course not enough. But anyway, that was one of the stories. One of the other stories was when I would be washing dishes or cooking in the kitchen over here in front of my window above my sink. I stand there and look out. Well, every now and then when I'm washing dishes, I'll see a person go by this big window behind me, this tall, lengthy window. I would see a glimpse of a person go by, and then I would lean forward to see who it is and where they're going. Well, there was never anybody there, and it happened several times, and it still happens. And so I just don't even pay any attention to it anymore. They're always going that direction. Well, one of my oldest granddaughter, when she was in college, she would come out here and take a shower. My husband and I were both at work, and she lived in another town, and she went to college here, and she worked here. So she would grab a quick shower and change clothes before she went to work after college. And so she was out here one day, and she took a shower, and she came in here to my kitchen to get a drink of water. And while she was getting a drink of water, she saw somebody go by the window, and she thought it was Mimi, which was Alan's mother that lived across the field in the house over there. Thought she had come over here to visit. So she called Mimi on the phone and said, Mimi, did you come over here? I don't know where you went. I saw you go by the window, but I can't find you. And Mimi said, no, hon, I'm home. I haven't been over there. Well, needless to say, Faith never came out here after college and got a shower. That scared her so bad. So she called me and she told me, you won't believe it, but I saw somebody go by the window, and it wasn't Mimi. I don't know who it was. Who else would it have been? And I said, well, honey, I don't know who else it would have been, but I've actually seen people go right by that window, and not really people, but I've seen a person go by that window. And I said it was a woman, and she was going toward the driveway. And I said, I've seen her several times go by. I said, Faith, when I see her, I said, she's always going toward the driveway. And Faith said, that's exactly right. She was going toward the driveway. I never see her face, but I see her. Well, Faith never came back out to do that again before. She would just go ahead and skip that shower and go on to work after school. Now, one time, Faith was about 12, and she would spend the night with Alan and myself. She did not want to sleep upstairs by herself, so she'd sleep downstairs with us. We had a big king bed. We do have a king-size bed, so Alan would sleep over here. I'd sleep in the middle. Faith would sleep over here. Well, she told me, she said, now, in the morning, Grammy, when you get up and you start doing around, you get me up. Because I would always get up ahead of her, and I would, do what I need to do, wash clothes or straighten up things, pick things up and do around so we and her could have a good time. Well, she said, wake me up when you get up. I said, okay, I will. I was up and I was doing around. Alan had got up early to go to work, but I was off and he was gone. And so I was doing around in here. I'd got up and fixed him a little bite to eat, and we were doing around trying to be real quiet so she could sleep. And I was just, and she came in the kitchen and she said, Grammy, why didn't you wake me up? You were supposed to wake me up. Remember I told you to get me up. I said, yeah, but it's okay that you sleep. Did I wake you up? Was I noisy, Faith? And she said, no, Grammy, it was Papa snoring. I said, what? She said, yeah, it was Papa snoring that woke me up. I said, honey, where is Papa? And she said, he's in the bed and he's got the cover pulled halfway up over his head. And I said, was he laying towards you or away from you? Did you see his face? And she said, he's laying away from me. I just saw his black curly hair. And he had the blanket halfway up on his head. And I said, well, let's go back there. Because I wanted to see Papa. Because Papa was at work. So I said, let's go back there. So we went back there. And she was astonished that he was not back there. She says, Grammy, I just saw him laying in the bed. I said, well, honey, Papa's been at work for about 2 hours. And she never spent the night out here again with us. Never. That really had an impact on her. She never spent the night out here again. She never comes out here if we're not home. She never comes unless we're here. She will only come if we're here. And she's grown now and still won't come unless we're here. There's been so many things I could go on, but I can't take up this much of your time with these stories that nobody can explain. And everybody's heard it. Faith has seen it. There's just, it's not explainable. I mean, I don't even know where to start to explain it. So anyway, I wanted to share some history of the home. The Bell Witch, I do believe, in Joshua's Gardner's biography, he did feel like that the haunting stopped when Betsy was around 18 years old, Betsy Bell. It did stop because Joshua did say in his biographies that he thought that the Bell Witch came with him to Weakley County. We've had nothing, with no kind of, nothing negative or scary or anything happen here. Nothing moved or nothing out of place or no, nothing. I've heard things. I've heard books drop that I can't explain. And you know what a book sounds like. A heavy book sounds like when it drops. You know what that is. I've seen things move, pot holders move. I've seen things like that. But, of course, nothing vicious or nothing bad. are scary. But I just wanted to share this information with you. It's very historical. My daughter and I, or maybe my other daughter, I don't know who all is going to be involved. I know my oldest daughter and I hope my other two daughters will also participate in it. We're going to write a book on the historical haunting of the Hazlewood home, the log cabin story. So I hope that when we get our book written and we get it out there, that you all will be interested enough in this to buy a copy of our book. And guys, thanks for coming by today. And I wanted to do sort of a Halloween video for you guys. Of course, I could have done a fall video, but I wanted to do some history. And, you know, when I tell people that I do believe from what I have seen and what I have witnessed here and what I can't explain here, you know, I do believe that the house has got some unusual characteristics and some unusual things have happened here. And I can't tell all of them in one video. So we're going to put them in our book, all of our stories. We're going to compile all of our things into a book. And I'm going to put some pictures up in a few minutes. So I hope you will stay and look at these pictures. But guys, if you have enjoyed the video in any way whatsoever, will you give me a thumbs up? And would you please subscribe to my channel? And guys, I love y'all so much. And thanks for letting me sit here in the log cabin. I'm in one of the log cabin rooms. And I do know that Alan's great-grandmother lived here. Her bed was right here in this corner, right over here. And that she did pass away here. And I believe the year, I may be wrong, but I believe the year was 1952 when she passed away here. And I remember them telling me the story about when she passed away, that they called the doctor and the doctor came and checked her, and that the family members took a mirror and held it up to her face to see if it had had a breath to it or any condensation or fog on the mirror. So I thought that was very interesting. I had never seen or heard of anybody doing that ever in my life. But stay for the photographs, and I love y'all. Bye. I wanted to show you some photographs of the log cabin, the historical home that I'm talking about, the historical log cabin. So many cabins have been torn down because you can see the disrepair it was in when we took it over in '83. Anyone else would have torn it down, but we did not. We restored it for future generations. So the video is about everything that has happened since we moved in to this log cabin. Not everything was told in the video. There was not enough time. It's just some of the samplings of things that have happened to us out here in the log cabin on our property.